Hi, everyone, and welcome to HomeTech. I am Seth Johnson, joined as usual by Jason Griffin. Jason, how you doing, man?
It's going great, Seth. How are you?
Good. I hear you're having lunches these days.
Yeah. I wanted to start out the show giving a little shout out to a regular listener to the show. His name is Pete. I'm going to leave his last name out because I didn't actually ask him if he was all right with me using his full name. So we always like to respect privacy when in doubt. But Pete actually lives here in Denver and has been a listener to the show for some time. And back when I had announced on air that we were going to be relocating here to Denver, Pete had reached out, and you know how these things go. It took a very long time of emails going back and forth and getting the schedules right. But turns out, coincidentally, not only does he live here in Denver, but he lives very close to where I happen to settle here. And so we were able to get together this weekend for lunch, my wife, and we had our baby girl with us, and he came with his wife and 2 kids. And so we had a lot of fun. It was really great. Rarely do you get an opportunity as a podcaster to connect on a personal level with a listener to the show. And so we really had a good time just chatting about the smart home and what he does. And Pete, if you're listening, thanks so much for listening and for joining us for lunch. My wife and I had a great time, and wanted to also give a quick shout out. We'll put this up in our show notes at HomeTech.fm/105. And Pete actually does some pretty cool stuff on YouTube. He's a DIY home automation guy, and he's really into doing like the Arduino stuff. And so really kind of great tinkering and do-it-yourself home automation, which is actually what we're going to be talking about quite a bit on this episode. And so I thought it was appropriate to give a shout-out to his YouTube channel as well.
Well, that's awesome, man. I just want to spit this out there. If anybody wants to eat lunch, I'm always up for food. So,
right, exactly.
Yep. Open invitation here.
So yeah, like I alluded to, we're kind of go back to doing one of our feature topic episodes, which we haven't done in a while, and we're gonna do a deep dive on some DIY home automation platforms and cover what some of the pros and cons are of those. We hear a lot of talk nowadays, of course, about the DIY smart home and what does that really mean and what does that entail. And I think this will be an interesting conversation where we compare some of the more robust DIY solutions out there versus the more simple things that we're hearing more about, obviously the point solutions and things of that nature. And so look forward to kind of comparing these platforms to those and again, pointing out what some of the pros and the cons are and the drawbacks to them.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. This isn't the point solution. So, we always talk about, the Nest thermostat or Lutron Caseta products, and those are great for what they are. But they're just a single device inside the house that operates within its own ecosystem very well. And then what you have with these solutions, and Jason, quite frankly, what you and I sell and what we install day to day, are home automation systems. And those talk to different point solutions or different products or just read different sensors and figure out what's going on in the house. So this is a little bit more involved when it comes to setting these up and getting them going. And we both did some research on this, and I don't know if it's going to be a deep dive, more like a high level overview of each one of these, I think.
Yeah, no, fair point.
Yeah, but we'll get into it later on. But I think it's going to be a fun thing. I thought it was fun to actually go out and look at this stuff and see where the state of these products are right now, because I think you and I both have been hearing these names fly left and right, and how people are just loving them. But it's something I've been wanting to check out for a while.
Yeah, and we've had some listeners reach out recently and ask why we haven't covered some of these more robust DIY solutions, and it was a valid question, and we wanted to take that to heart and dive in and take a look at them. We will touch on some of the reasons why we don't spend a lot of time focusing on them, but it is interesting to know that they're out there. And if you're really into doing robust home automation and you want to do it yourself, there are ways to get comparable functionality to what you get in a professionally installed solution like Control4 or Savant. But at the end of the day, it is more complicated, and it comes down to a question of usability and is it right for you? And so we'll get into that. But before we do, we did want to cover a few news stories. It was a very, very busy week, so we're going to cover a few of these stories here. One of them that we wanted to jump into to start was a story that I actually wrote a short blog post about over at HomeTech.fm/blog, and it was a story about Vizio announcing that they are going to put an end to the physical button remote, as they boldly claim in the article. And I have some questions about that, although I do think the approach is kind of cool, and what they're doing was interesting. Don't know, Seth, if you had a chance to really dive in and see that story or not.
No, I just had a skim over it before we started the show here, and I saw what they were doing, and I get it. I understand what they're doing. They've removed most of the brains out of the TV and put them into an Android tablet, and they're just going to use the streaming abilities of Android. You know, the casting, Miracast, or not Miracast,
Google Cast,
yeah. I think Miracast is the technology behind it, but they're using like AirPlay functionality essentially too. You know, it's the same thing, to play whatever comes in over the tablet onto the TV.
Yep,
which is novel, I suppose. But what happens when that remote dies?
Fair question. Yeah, I think in and of itself that aspect of the story is novel, and it is kind of a cool idea, I guess, in the sense that what I get excited about it is that I've only had bad experiences with the built-in streaming solutions that come on so-called smart TVs. And what Vizio is trying to accomplish here and get away from is to break that mold where we think about streaming on our TVs as in we have to use those built-in apps. And so they're, like you said, taking the brains out of the TV and saying we've got a perfectly good platform for streaming. It's called Android. And I do believe they have an iOS version of this as well. We'll come back to that in just a second. And what they're saying is, you know, let's not think of a lot of people think of a tablet as a second screen, and they're kind of flipping that around, and they're saying, well, the TV is your second screen. The tablet's your primary interaction, your point of control. They've removed all of the on-screen menus, so configuration like picture settings and things like that will actually be done through this tablet. I don't know if we said this. It's a 6-inch tablet. We did say Android comes with the TV, so it ships with the TV in addition to a traditional IR remote. And then that basically becomes your main point of control for streaming things like Netflix or Hulu or what have you. And so basically what you've got is a cooked-in way to do Google Cast or mirroring, and that's kind of cool, I guess. What I question is their proclamation in this article that the end of days are here for physical button remotes, and I just couldn't disagree more. I can think of countless situations where a simple physical button is going to be preferable to fumbling for an app, and I just don't see how that's ever going to change. And so I'm personally one who believes that some sort of physical tactile control will always be there, as opposed to purely an app-based solution. But that doesn't seem to be Vizio's stance. They're pretty convinced in this approach.
Yeah, as somebody who's actually made a control app, that is basically, this is its only function, is to control a TV or control an AV system. I've always found it odd that people actually do like this, and people there are some people out there who really like using a phone or a tablet to control their TV, which it surprises me. Just that flat out surprises me, because I like the tactile feedback too. So I guess for those people, this would be a pretty big hit. I actually just had a gentleman walk into my office and say, "Oh yeah, I like to control everything on my phone, and I don't really care about the remotes." I said, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
That's interesting, but it always surprises me, because I can't focus on the TV and then look down at the bright screen and then back up at the dark TV. I don't know. It just takes me too far out of what I'm watching, I guess.
Yeah, and I think about other situations where you just quickly want to turn the volume down or pause it or whatever it is, and just being able to reach and grab for a remote is something that I have a hard time envisioning myself not having. The other thing that was a glaring omission to me, I think, is there was really no details at all about how this, what they're calling the SmartCast app, will integrate or not with third-party AV devices. And so what happens if you have a surround sound system with an AV receiver and a cable box and a Blu-ray player? At that point, you're obviously going to need some way to control those. And Vizio's saying, well, we're going to kill the remote. The days of the remote are over. Well, I kind of doubt that. And so I think it is a great approach. I think if it gets us away from that model of looking at streaming apps built into TVs as a viable solution, then I'm all for it, because I just really don't have any good things to say about any of those. But I do think there are some questions still to be answered about this.
Yeah, it seems like an interesting thing. The only thing I'm thinking of when I see this is that they have a protocol they're using to control the TV over IP with their little tablet there. And it would be nice to get my hands on that so we could write some real control software and we don't have to have a little IR flasher on the TV anymore. Always looking for an API, man.
Oh, yeah. Seth and his API is always on the hunt.
Yep.
Well, let's move on here. We got a second story. Looks like August is actually entering the market of a door cam. So they've always had their smart lock, and now they've got a camera. And I believe the story also contained a little keypad that they've released, which looked kind of neat.
Yeah. So August has been pretty. I've heard August a lot more than I've heard the other door locks, and as a professional integrator, like we sell all of the quick sets, the Schlage, Baldwin, all those quite a bit. But August comes up quite a bit more from consumers giving me feedback saying, "Oh, I saw this August smart lock. Have you ever seen one of those?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, I have this. It matches your door hardware." And they generally end up going with that because the price isn't terribly much more expensive than the August.
Right.
But the August has been out there for so long. Now they've come out with a $199 doorbell camera and a $79 smart keypad, which complement the $200 August smart lock as well. But this thing is very interestingly designed, I guess. It's like 3 inches squared and has kind of a big giant button in the middle of it. I guess that's the doorbell button, and it has the camera on it and a microphone, so you can do like the things that you do with a Ring doorbell as well. It requires wiring, which one of the photos in one of the reviews I saw was actually quite funny, because the gentleman didn't have the door frame where his wire was to uninstall the existing doorbell, which was only one of those little tiny doorbells,
right,
and install this 3-inch wide doorbell without being able to open his door. Like, I don't know, you'll have to see the picture. It's hilarious.
Where the doorbell wire came out was on the door frame, and the door frame was thinner than the doorbell, and so it's just hanging out over the edge and prevented him from being able to open his door, which obviously is an issue for the target consumer. For a company like August, they're really going for DIY, and they want people to be able to just go buy it and have a very simple installation process. But this does point out, again, another one of those things where I looked at these pictures, and the first thing I thought was, well, if our guys were there doing it, we just move the wire. We just put the wire in a better place where you don't have to deal with that. Now, obviously, you've got construction concerns there, and that may be significantly easier said than done. But at the same time, it's worth noting that, yeah, this thing requires a wire, so you can't just stick it anywhere. I like the approach that they're using the doorbell wire personally. I think that having that option as opposed to relying on batteries, particularly when you have something like a camera in there that's going to drain a lot of power, I think is probably a preferable solution in my mind. And I know you don't seem to, I'm not sure if you're down on the design or if you're just questioning it because of, some of these particular pictures we've seen. I like it. I think it looks pretty slick. The keypad, I think, looks a little old school, but at the same time, you know me, I'm a big fan of, again, physical, tactile control. And I think this is great. I know, like at our office, for instance, we have a smart lock there, but it's the one of them that has the number combination built right into it. And that's what we use exclusively, and I love it. I think it's super convenient to not have to fumble for a key or not have to fumble for a smartphone, and so I think the keypad is a nice addition, and the camera looks pretty good. $200, not too bad. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I don't care for the design on this one. I obviously like the Ring, the new Ring Pro a lot better than anything that's out there. Maybe the Vivint one. The keypad does look a little dated to me. It looks like a plastic box of mush, but I don't know. Maybe I need to see
something
it in
like
person.
That.
I do like the price. Like, the price is kind of cool, and it complements the doorbell. It's $79 for the keypad, I think. and it complements the door lock, so you can just type in a code real quick, and you don't have to have the ugly keypad on your door, which is most, the front door.
Right.
If you put the August lock on that, then you have this ugly keypad with the other one. So this one, it's separate. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. Let's move on to our next story here, and this is quickly becoming quite a dramatic episode to be watching, but it looks like there's just been some drama coming out of Nest, and this was another one I actually shared a few of my thoughts on over on our blog, and I caught an article by Stacey Higginbotham over on Fortune, where she talked about the mess at Nest and how, in her opinion, kind of echoes the mess that's going on in the smart home in general, and we'll get to my thoughts on that, but I know that there was some drama here, an article that you pointed out that looks very interesting. And so Greg Duffy, who is the founder of Dropcam, actually put this article up on Medium and really pointing out some issues that he's taken recently with some comments made by Tony Fadell, who's the CEO of Nest. And this is turning into quite the episode.
Yeah, this is drama playing out. People have been pointing this out for quite some time, that Nest has a lot going wrong over in the management. There's evidently like a ton of people who have just left over the past couple of months. But I guess what Mr. Duffy took offense to was Fidell's implication that the employees that they got from the Dropcam team weren't really up to snuff, and that's why they're having their problems at Nest, is because some of the people that came in and that joined Nest, that weren't part of the thermostat team,
right,
that doesn't work very well. They're the problem, and people came in, they were a very small team and they weren't very experienced, and Greg kind of takes him to task on that, going down the list of things that Dropcam was excellent at, and the things that they were doing, and actually how much money they were bringing in. One of the funniest things that he wrote in here was, if Fidell wants to stick by his statement, I challenge him to release full financial. Easy prediction, he won't.
Right.
He was, yeah.
Right.
So this is a interesting article. It seems like the wheels are falling off over there at Nest.
Yeah. It's manifested itself in just a lack of product. We've talked about it before. We haven't seen really anything new out of Nest in quite some time, and the only thing that they've put out that could even sort of be called new since the acquisition is the new camera, which is basically a refreshed version of Dropcam. And clearly, from what I've been reading and what's out there circulating in the tech press, is Tony Fadell seems to have a bit of a Steve Jobs complex and is micromanaging and not making decisions and just not allowing his people basically the liberty to create and ship new products at the end of the day. And I think that's what it really comes down to. Stacey's article I thought was interesting, and it made some great points. I think I disagree with her in the sense that she tied a lot of what we're hearing about Nest to the broader issue that she sees in the smart home, which is a lack of interoperability. And we hear people talk about that all the time, and it is an issue for people like you and me and the hardcore enthusiasts who are really out there trying to make a true smart home and home automation work right now. But at the end of the day, Nest's issue has been that they can't ship product. And I don't see it as having anything to do with interoperability. I think companies like Nest and Apple, their long vision and what they want is for consumers to play inside of a walled garden, and they want to own the smart home. And I think that really, if we think about the mass market and we think about the everyday consumer, they don't care about interoperability. What they want is just operability. And I mean, they just want something that works. And I think that the example that I put up in my blog post is that if Nest tomorrow came out with a $49 or $100 light switch that worked on Weave and worked flawlessly inside of their ecosystem, then 99% of the population would never know enough to even question the fact that they don't work with Z-Wave light switches, for instance. The everyday consumer would be more than happy to go out and buy that light switch if it just worked. And so I don't think that interoperability is the big problem here. I think it's just clearly a company that's being mismanaged and can't ship new product.
Yeah, and they're losing talent too. I mean, they've lost, according to this article and from things that I've heard, they've lost nearly 500 people. So definitely some frustration there. If you lose that many people out of your team, of what they're saying is a currently 1,200 person team, that's going to leave some holes that are very, very tough to fill these days, because all of these people who work on the type of products that Nest is working on, and quite frankly, every other automation vendor out there, they're in pretty high demand. Like, developers are not cheap people to come across.
Right.
So yeah, I hope they work it out, and hope they get whatever management issues they have worked out, and start shipping product again, because what a mess. Just what a mess.
Yeah, I don't go out of my way to find stories like this where we're talking about what's happening in the boardroom and executive decisions, but this one's become impossible to ignore. There's been stories all over the place, and at the end of the day, what I really care about is where's the new product? What are we supposed to get excited about? And everybody talks about Nest when we meet new clients, and it's like, well, what about Nest? That's always one of the first things that comes up. And so clearly they still have a great reputation amongst everyday consumers, and that product is still a hit, but they've got to do something, because it just has been really no news out of them at all. Speaking of other products that consumers really know by name and ask for, Sonos is another big company that we've been talking about recently, is having some shakeups and maybe a transition going on at that company too. And Chris Backus, who's a friend of the show and good listener, and you can find him at AV Control Guy on Twitter, was kind enough to send us a link to a story where it looks like Sonos actually lost its chief product officer, a gentleman by the name of Mark Whitten, and it sounds like he's been with the company for a couple of years and presumably played a very a prominent role in developing some of their new products, and it looks like he's on his way out now, and so who knows if that is directly related. I would assume to the shift that we talked about a few weeks ago taking place at Sonos.
Man, I feel for Sonos. I'd really want to see them pull through whatever they're doing. I'm just really worried that they're going to go down this road of trying to develop and thinking that their platform needs, just another music streaming service to save it. Because this is one product line I don't want to see it go away. I could care less about Nest, honestly. Like, it's just a thermostat, but I just bought a play bar, man.
You got a personal stake in this one.
Exactly. I mean, that's a Nest thermostat. What, $250. A play bar is $600-$700. So yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, you have to wonder if they're getting away from kind of their core mission. I mean, they've just always been a company that's been so laser focused on doing what they do and being the best at it, and that's why I was so surprised when all of this news started breaking about Sonos transitioning and laying people off and shifting focus, and I just didn't see that one coming at all. Yeah.
Well, you got to be moving on this, because the competition starts to see what you're doing and starts to do it. Or in Denon's case, copy it exactly.
Right.
And Denon, one of the big things that Denon was doing with their Heos line was they were saying, look, we're open to integration. We want you to integrate with our product. And that was a completely different message than what you got from Nest at any point in time. So that's why Denon did so well with their Heos lines at CEDIA, why that booth we saw was packed that one year.
Yeah.
It was wall to wall, and Sonos was just crickets. So yeah, it's we like to see people moving their product down the road, and how much longer are we going to have to wait for an official Sonos API? I mean, that's been talked about for years now. It has. Yep.
Well, interesting to watch. A couple of related stories there with big companies and seemingly having trouble, and so I think that it just goes to show that the smart home is hard, and as much excitement as we've seen since we started this show, some of it has kind of tapered off over the last 6 months to a year, and maybe we're entering that trough of disillusionment where some of it's kind of calmed down, and we're really going to see who the serious players are and who's willing to keep innovating and come up with solutions that work. And speaking of the smart home being difficult, let's transition into our feature story here. And again, we're going to talk about some of the more robust, pure DIY home automation products. And so these are things that go beyond making your Nest thermostat communicate with your drop cam. This is a level of integration well beyond that, and it's more akin, like we said earlier, to the kind of functionality that you would get if you were to purchase a solution from a Control4 or Savant. But these are things that you can go out and do yourself for much cheaper. Obviously, the trade-off there being that you have to be willing to invest a lot of your time, not only in the research and picking your platform, but installing it, maintaining it, upkeeping it, maybe dealing with a spouse who can't figure out how to make it work, and user interfaces as well. I think on some of these we saw that we're going to talk about, I think, struggle a little bit. Savant, for example, great user interface, beautifully done. That just isn't a primary concern, clearly, for some of these other companies who are just really focused on making things work. So let's jump right in, Seth. I think you kind of had the leg on me on research this week. I want to let you sort of lead out here with the first product.
Yeah, well, it was exciting. Again, it's exciting to take a look at these because I've been meaning to do this for quite some time. I don't want to pretend that I'm just, I'm stuck in my little world of Control4 and Savant and these larger dealer-based systems, and pretend that there's nothing else going on in this market. So I was happy to go ahead and start looking into this stuff, and especially with the price of like hardware. Used to, you would hear about these software solutions and you're like, oh, that's really cool, I should look into that. And then you start looking into it and you're like, oh, I really need another computer to run this thing in my house. And
right.
Okay, so that's going to be $700 or $800. And now everybody is trying to get on like the Raspberry Pi, which is like a under $100 computer. I mean, it's, I think, dirt cheap now, like $30-$40. That's what every home automation platform is trying to run on, or it seems like all the software guys are just itching to get down and run on the Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, no, it's a game changer. I mean, to be able to get the power that you get in those for so cheap I think it's a valid point to bring up here, is that has changed the game for some of these, where before the look of a cheap piece of software or whatever it was might have been a little bit deceiving. But I think now that's not as much of an issue, because like you said, some of these platforms are being designed to work on extremely inexpensive devices like a Raspberry Pi. Right. And I want to try and keep this conversation in context. Like, Jason, you and I, we go out and we install these systems every single day. And there tends to be like a push in DIY to like really integrate with like leading edge technologies and stuff that hasn't been on the market very long. And that's like, to us, there's so many red flags that just kind of fly up with that. I mean, how many times has somebody come to you over your career? How many times has somebody come in and said, hey, I got this off Amazon, can you guys integrate with it? It's brand new, you've never even seen it, this is the first time you've seen it. Right. Oh, dozens and dozens. Yeah.
Dozens,
I mean, yeah, if not getting up close to, 100 probably odd devices that have just come my way over time. And we don't really know what to do with them at first. We can usually find a way to make it work. But yeah, that does always throw you a little bit of a curveball. Well,
and so the problem I see mostly with those is that, the curveball. Like, most of the times they don't have a API or a way to integrate with them, and they become very tough to deal with. So when software, I guess where I'm going with this is when software solutions pop up in front of you and I, like these types of systems that we're going to review and go over, we have that in the back of our heads, like, where is this going to fail on me? That's already a bias that I'm going to recognize I have. Like, I know what I'm looking for there. So I'm going to try and temper that and move on with this.
Full disclosure. No,
full disclosure. I'm trying to be as unbiased as I can, but recognizing that I do have the bias that is there from dealing with these types of products for what amounts to almost 2 decades. Like, this is stuff that I've been tinkering with for at least that long. And when it comes down to the end of the day, this is what I make my living at. You and I have to have products that work. So hopefully that makes sense, and we can explore these within that context as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So the first on the list, we really didn't deep dive onto this one because there wasn't very much I could get into. Was Domotics with a Z, and we'll have all the links to this stuff in the show notes. This one looks interesting. It's completely software based. It has iPhone and Android apps. It's free open source software, so you can download it and install it on Linux or Windows embedded devices, which means it's fairly lightweight.
Yep.
The reason I didn't go very much into this is because there's not much to do on the website. Like when you click the manual, it gives you this giant PDF that you can scroll through. The setup doesn't look terrible. Like it's all web-based, it looks like, after you get it up and going on a computer. And I guess I should say that's the first hurdle with most of these. Like you have to get a Raspberry Pi and you have to at least have the knowledge of getting Linux installed on it, which is not easy for a lot of people. So
certainly wouldn't be easy for me. I can tell you that much.
Right.
We've joked about it before. I get to the command line anytime I'm looking at something and it's like the directions say, okay, open up your terminal window. And I'm basically like, I'm done. Not going there. Now, granted, obviously you get into the terminal window and if you're willing to follow instructions, I could probably muddle my way through it and be okay. But like you said, that is the first hurdle is this is a software solution. And so you've got to have a Raspberry Pi or something to run it on to get up and going.
Yep. I think with me, that alone is the biggest hurdle with these software solutions. And it's kind of silly to think about it that way. Like, yeah, that's what they are. They're software solutions. But the biggest hurdle is actually getting a computer, setting it up, configuring it correctly, and then downloading some files to it and running it from a command prompt, most likely, to at least get to the interface where you can start configuring things.
Yep.
And there are a ton of like different commands that I recognize a lot of these. I use them, but my eyes start to glaze over, and I program stuff. So like if my eyes start to glaze over, then I know that the average user or the average person trying to figure this out, they're not going to get very, very far with this, I think.
Right.
So that's Domotics. Check it out. It may be up your alley. I really didn't do very much more looking into it, but it seems to have some presence out there. So maybe it could be for you.
It could be. And really, I think like a lot of these, it just comes down to some people, this is a hobby and it's a fun thing to do. So there are tons of people out there who enjoy installing Linux and working with Raspberry Pis and getting deep down into the software and all of that sort of configuration, right? And that's something that they find enjoyable. And so for somebody like that, this might be a great lightweight little solution to get you started. I'm looking at the website here, the integrations and protocols. They've got just a quick bullet list here. X10 right at the top, Z-Wave, Philips Hue lights. I'm not going to read the whole list, but some of the more common ones that you might have heard of: Lifix light bulbs, Belkin Wemo. Looks like at the very bottom of the list, interestingly, Sonos, different solutions for integrating Sonos. And so who knows what kind of third-party hacks those are, but they've got quite a few integrations and looks like a little lightweight solution that if you're into tinkering could be a good fit for you.
Yeah. Like I said, didn't really get very far with that one just because the rough manual and rough way that you'd have to install it, which I guess the same could be said for most of these software guys. Not the next one though, Indigo, which is at Indigo Domo, which again we'll link in the show notes. This is a purely Mac-based one.
Yeah. This one looks. I thought this one looked kind of neat relative to the group that we looked at, and I jumped in and took a look. It's a software solution, runs on a Mac, like you said. So if you don't already have a Mac sitting around, then obviously you've got to factor that into your decision, and it may not be the right product for you. But if you're like a lot of people and you've got a Mac Mini sitting around and you want to do some home automation, this could be a great place to start. Looks pretty powerful. They've got a free trial you can do. Indigo 6 Pro software, which is at a higher level, more features, goes for $200, and Indigo 6 Lite is about $100. And we won't get into what the specific differences are here, is kind of beyond the scope of this show, but just know there are a couple different versions. One of them a little lighter weight if you're looking to save some money. And really, this is a software that's aimed very beyond the fact that it's aimed at Mac users. It's Z-Wave, Insteon, and they've got X10 as well. But really, X10 obviously we know is kind of going by the wayside here. So Z-Wave and Insteon, if you're in one of those two camps and you own a Mac, this is probably a great place to start and take a look at. They've got some bundles they sell with different Z-Wave or Insteon hardware to get you started. And at that point, the interface is kind of vanilla. It's not horrible. I certainly wouldn't say it's bad, but it's not. It was clearly designed with utility in mind, and that's fine for its target audience. It's got different tabs on the side where you can look at your actions and your triggers and action groups they allow you to do, and so basic automation, right? I mean, that's really what we're talking about. You could have a simple sensor that detects one thing, and then inside of your Indigo software, trigger that to turn on a Z-Wave light. So basic, simple automation done inside of the software. And one thing I did look at when I was looking at some of these platforms is the ability to do IR control. And so what if you did want to use some sort of event for some reason to trigger a channel change or turning the TV on or something like that? You are able to do that. You've got to use global cache hardware in order to do that. So it looks like an interesting platform, and definitely one I would consider if I was getting into doing this, being a Mac user, and if I was, again, looking at Z-Wave and Insteon as my platform for my smart home, this would be a great place to look.
Yeah, I'm looking at their website. This is probably one of the better ones that I ran across. You are the price is up there, and it's even further up there if you consider the cost of a Mac on top of it. Especially that the Mac always has to be home and running for this thing to continue to work when you're not there, which is something I think I'm going to touch on later. But they do have, you mentioned that they are pretty integrated with the Z-Wave and what was it, X10 or Insteon?
Yeah, Z-Wave, Insteon, and X10.
Yeah, but they do have Lutron on their support as well as Clipshaw, which is kind of a bigger brand overseas. And I thought it was interesting. Some of the logos they have on the website under the expandable tag, I guess it's right on the front page. Looks to be like some of the brands that TiVo, DSC, Elk, Honeywell, Pioneer. These are brands that you and I deal with day to day. So I think this is a pretty robust solution. The interface, yeah, you said not so great, but I think this is one, if you have an extra Mac Mini laying around and you want to tinker, this might be probably the best place to start software-wise.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it looks like a very well-supported software in terms of an active user community. I was clicking around on their forums and looked like quite a few posts going on in there and some healthy dialogue, which is always good when you're getting into doing something like this. You want to make sure that you've got a community of people that you can tap on if you've got questions or get stuck on something. The software's up to version 6, so they've been at this for a little while and have presumably gotten a lot of things figured out over those different versions. And so you can fairly safely assume that it's a pretty stable platform and one that works pretty well. If you fit into those checkboxes, again, Mac user, Z-Wave, Insteon, there are a lot of third-party plugins, and again, that kind of ties back to the user community. So surely they can integrate with a lot more than just Z-Wave and Insteon, but those are kind of the core technologies that they support. And then you get over into the third-party plugins, and I'm sure there's quite a bit more you can do.
Oh, yeah, and one more thing. They also sell them, which I thought was, very nice too. Like, you don't have to go hunt down whatever Z-Wave switch on Amazon works. These guys will sell you that switch, and you can, maybe get all the same support and everything. If you have a problem, maybe you give them a buzz or write on the forums or whatever. I didn't really look into the support, but if they're selling something, maybe they support it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Which I thought was nice. It's one-stop shop.
One neck to ring. Yeah, that's what you want. Well, let's move on to the next one here is Home Assistant. And this one I think has been getting quite a bit of buzz and people have been talking about. And Seth, I'm going to let you kind of jump in and explain what it is.
Yep, it's at home-assistant.io, which is their front-facing website. They also have a demo link, and I'll put the link too on the show notes. This one, at first glance, looks really cool. It has a ton of integrations. with it, including Nest, If This Then That, Hue, Plex, Kodi, a bunch of stuff with Google Cast, and Echo. They have an Echo driver, it looks like. So I was pretty excited to get started on this, and then Jason, I got to the install portion of it.
Okay.
It's a command line install, so you got to open up Terminal and start typing things in the command line.
Oh,
Not
boy.
the end of the world for some people, but for you, that's where you dropped out.
That's it. We're done.
Yep. It's written in Python, which is pretty awesome because Python's a pretty popular language, and there's a lot of support out there for it. It's written in Python 3.5, not 2.7, which I had installed. So without having to redo the computer that I was on, I just didn't want to deal with it. I gave up.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yep. It's like, I'm not going to go down this road right now. It had some pretty extremely limited AV integrations, and the biggest problem I had with this wasn't like the interface, wasn't like the integrations were awesome. The biggest problems I had with this was the setup. Everything that you do with this Home Assistant is actually done in what's called YAML configuration files. Like, you literally have to type things out in words for things to happen. And they have to be structured and put in such a way. It's not a good idea.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
No.
It surprised me because at a glance, they've got a much more modern looking website, I feel like, than a couple of the others I looked at. The screenshot you included here on our little internal notes as we were getting prepped for the show looks a little more modern and clean, and I thought it looked like it might be a simpler solution to implement, but it turns out that seems to be exactly the opposite. And so maybe more resources need to go into making the setup a little bit easier. Obviously, they know who their target market is, and I don't presume that they are aiming necessarily to go mainstream, and so maybe that's not a big concern for them. But I can tell you, for me, as a fairly technical guy and a guy who likes to roll up my sleeves and get my hands dirty, I'm pressed for time, and I think the vast majority of people are going to really struggle with that. And so again, it has to be something that, to look at a platform like this, clearly looks like they've got a lot of momentum on integrations and are doing some good things there. But you've got to be ready to really invest some time, it looks like, into getting this thing up and running.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's this is probably the worst one I ran across for configuration. It does look okay when you get started, and the demo, which is on their front page, and I think I have a link to it. It looks okay, and then you start messing around with things and going, oh, this is all it's really doing here. This is all it's really doing here. Like, I can toggle a switch to open a garage door, and then what's the funny part of oh man, I don't know what the affinity between open source projects and graphs is, but holy cow, guys, if you're working on open source graphs and charts, if you're working on an open source project, do this. Take the graphs in your pipeline and just put them down last. Like, after you finish everything else, then put the graphs in. I don't understand why people think graphs are what people want to see ever. No one cares. Like, I just click the garage door. Now I can see that the garage door is open and closed and what times it was open and closed. That's great. Maybe making the interface a little bit better should have been a little bit higher on that priority.
Making it a little easier to set up and configure, right? Yeah, I think there is kind of an obsession with companies in the smart home in general about graphs and charts and being able to go back and analyze things and see activity. And I've always struggled to see the value in that. I suppose I can see it for things like energy usage. That makes some sense. But beyond that, I struggle with that. And I think it's indicative to me of the fact that technology has evolved in the home to a point now where having the little sensors and the ability to collect all of this data is very inexpensive and easy to do, but we still haven't really figured out how to make that data useful or relevant. And so people say, well, let's put it in a chart and make
Let's
it look
put it in a
pretty.
graph, yeah.
And so
that's
it's
the
like,
only way it's relevant is if I can visualize it and see that the sensor reported that the temperature was 53 degrees here and it went up 1 degree here.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
I could see the other useful thing I could potentially see, and I have no idea if these companies are doing it or if this one in particular. But we talk about reporting and stuff when we're looking at remote monitoring and management of client systems, for instance. And so this could be relevant to you if you're a DIYer and you want to be able to make sure you ensure uptime for the system, so you don't have an angry spouse at home who's mad because they can never turn the lights on. And I think reporting on sort of issues and drop-offs and when things have trouble connecting, so that maybe if you are having issues with your system, you can look back over time and see where the drop-offs are happening. Does it correlate to anything, stuff like that? And so being able to maybe track down problematic parts of your system, I could see charts and graphs potentially playing a useful role in that. But yeah, I don't really need to see.
I think the effort would be better spent on making a system that doesn't need charts and graphs. I mean, honey, can you send me the graph as to when that actually wasn't working? Because I'm not seeing it on my graph. I think that's not going to go over very well.
Fair point.
Come on. So yeah, that's going to be one of my many graph rants. I'm going to stop there, just leave it off. But I'll mention when these guys, the next ones. Another thing you keep saying, Jason, companies. These are not companies. These are open source projects run by who knows who. I don't know. They're probably really cool developers and probably really fun people to hang out with. But they are not companies. You will not get support from these other than writing to them on their forums, maybe shooting them an email or something. You may get something back. If you have a bug, you're going to have to wait for it to be fixed and deployed, and then you're going to have to reinstall the system to get it fixed. This is not what you're probably used to if you're dealing with, an app update or something like that. This goes well beyond that.
Right. Good point. Well, let's move on to the next one here. We're going to talk a little about OpenHab, and this is a big one. I know a while back we had a gentleman named Cameron, and again, I'm going to avoid using his full name, but Cameron had written in through our website and had specifically asked about OpenHab and wondered if it was a topic that we'd be interested in covering. And who knows, we may do a deeper dive on it in particular someday. It is one of the bigger ones out there, but it is one that we wanted to touch on briefly here in this show.
Yep. So OpenHab, it is a software-based platform. So meaning you're going to need your own computer again. It is written in Java completely and based on the OSGI architecture, which is Java's way. And I really don't really understand why everything has to be these acronyms for things, but it's basically plugins. So it's how you extend the system out. I don't know why they have to complicate things. They could just call it plugins and call it a day.
That'd be too easy.
Yeah, I guess. It's open source, so they have to make it sound official.
Complicated, right.
Yeah. So, let's see. So, as you can kind of guess by the tone of my voice, I'm not too happy with this one. Although, it is getting to be very popular and written in Java, so that means there is a ton of developers that can get on this and actually do something with it. So, maybe in the future it'll get better. It does have charts, so we can go ahead and check that box off.
Yep.
All of the rules and scripts are written inside of their OpenHab, what they call OpenHab Designer, which is basically the Java Eclipse IDE that they've kind of tinkered with and taken some buttons out of. So you're going to be writing Java code to set up and deploy rules and that kind of things into the system. Not my favorite, but if you're into that kind of thing, this one could be okay for you. If you're installing this particular software on your computer, you might get by opening up the OpenHab editor designer and copying and pasting and putting things in. I would much rather see that done as a visually, through an interactive web page or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I guess they got to start somewhere, and programming is tough. So. But I don't. This is kind of like, this takes us back to Crestron. This is you're programming code in your system and hitting go, and it compiles it up and sends it on its way. like I would much rather see something else done for the programming to make this thing a little bit better.
Sure. Well, let's move through this one a little bit. Give us kind of the pros and cons. Again, this was one that you researched a bit, and I want to know just your bullet points. What's your overall look at OpenHab? Who's it good for? What are some of the high level pros and cons to it?
Well, pros. Let's start with pros. They have an iOS, Android app. The apps don't look all that great, but they serve some basic functionality. The website one doesn't look very good, but the way they're putting this out there is, hey, this is fully open source. We don't care what the interface is. I'm sure if you wanted to make a better interface for OpenHab, you totally could. Like, you could make your own app for OpenHab and sell it on the App Store, or put it out there, or whatever. The integrations with this are up there. Like, this one probably had one of the biggest integration lists that I came across. And you can extend it too, since you're programming in Java at this point. You can actually extend it out into other technologies. So I think this one, out of all of the ones that are like open source and program and roll your own everything, this one probably has the most potential. But I would, on a scale of 1 to 10, like, this is still hanging out at 2. I don't think it's there yet. You can do some stuff, but it's not, unless you're willing to get your hands dirty. That's really the only thing I would say that would be good about this. Like, you're going to get your hands dirty with this one. Yeah.
So in summary, if you're a Java programmer and you want to do some home technology stuff, this is for you. If you're not a Java programmer, probably need to look elsewhere.
Yep, exactly.
Gotcha. Well, the next one we want to touch on is one that a little bit of a different approach, called OpenModix, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that okay. And this looks like it's a product really UK based, I think, and it's a DIN rail system, and they're actually taking an approach of a combination open source software and hardware as well. And so they've got different DIN rail modules. They've got a gateway, which is your main brain of the system, and then you've got IO modules, basically inputs and outputs. And so a lot of the focus was on the obvious things that you would think of, controlling electrical circuits, so lighting, shades. They mentioned that would obviously be high voltage shades, basic IO functionality there, emphasis on hardwired technology, which I thought was interesting in today's day and age, when all we hear about is everything going wireless. They're really looking at hardwired and actually emphasizing that as a way to increase the reliability of the system. And I thought that was interesting. They've got temperature and humidity sensors, power clamps for energy monitoring were a couple other things I saw on there. And starter pack was $799, and I believe that was euros. For the gateway, 3 input modules, 2 output modules, and a power supply. So that's a fair amount of hardware there to get you started. And looked like an interesting product. I think really we don't see a lot of the DIN rail stuff here in the US for whatever reason. And so I don't know a lot about the install on that side, but I know it's a pretty standard thing overseas, and a lot of people like it and use it. And so I think that it could be a good solution if you're looking to just do some lighting and shade control and do some basic IO sensing with temperature and humidity and motion sensors and things of that nature.
Yeah. The reason I guess I was kind of ragging on OpenHab for getting your hands dirty. This one you could really get your hands dirty, because not only is it open source, it's open source hardware. So you can go on their website and buy it, or you can download the schematics for each one of these little DIN rail devices and actually build your own, which would be kind of insane, but hey, more power to you if you can print out.
Right.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, kind of an interesting platform. And I don't know if you have anything else to add to that one, or if not, we can jump on to the next one here.
No, we can keep going to the next one. And we're kind of shifting out of software and kind of moving into software hardware combos. Because the next one up is HomeSeer, which is, now you can buy the software outright, and it starts about $250 and goes on up depending on which modules you get or upgrade options that you want to put on there. But this is a do-it-yourself solution that you can also buy, like a controller from them, that is all put together. It works out of the box, and those start at $199. They go up to $11.99. So you can get quite expensive with these. this one has been around for quite some time. So I want to say it's battle tested and has been out there for a while. I've known about this one for quite some time, probably before we started this podcast. The installation on this, so much easier. I mean, when you're downloading software, this software, it runs on an installer. You get everything up and going. It runs on Windows, Linux, and there's the way you can get it running on a Mac if you really, really wanted to. It has a mobile app that has a very colorful interface and a website interface that you can access in your house. Both of them look pretty dated, but I'd say overall this one's okay.
Yeah. I was going to say the interface does look a little dated, very colorful. Everything now is kind of going more flat, and so I did get that same impression right off the bat as well. But I'd say probably more user-friendly than some of the other ones we've seen. It may look a little dated, but at least it looks to be laid out in a way where, each screen is well thought out for what that particular function of that screen is supposed to be, whereas some of these other ones, it just kind of like every screen looks the same, and it's just like a bunch of buttons and sliders or something on the screen. So it does look like a little bit more thought has been given to the user interface on this one. Like you said, it's been around for a while. This is one that I admittedly am not very familiar with in practice, but I know I've heard of it quite a bit, and I know it's got a lot of people who use it, and that is something that is important. Like we mentioned before, when you're looking to do one of these DIY home automation solutions, you really do want to look for one that has an active user community and a bunch of people out there who are doing it, because you are going to run into issues. And as you were saying before, when you're not really dealing with a traditional company where you can call a support number, all you're really going to be able to get in terms of support is going to be through that user community. And so that is a very important consideration, and I think one that HomeSeer has an advantage on over some of the other ones that we've talked about.
Yep. I looked up the date. They've been around since 1999, which is longer than
quite
most home automation companies you and I deal with.
Yeah, definitely. No, they have been around for quite a while, and looks like a fairly compelling option if you're looking to get into doing some of this stuff. The next one we want to touch on is a product called ISY, and this is one I did a little bit of research on. And I think what appeals to me about this one is we've talked about this before, where you've got some of these solutions that are pure software solutions, and they look really inexpensive until you factor in, if you don't already have a computer to run them on, you're going to have to go out and buy one. Now, granted, that's getting a little bit cheaper with things like Raspberry Pi, but as we've also talked about, that can get a little complicated to install and get configured and set up. And this one, basically what they've done is kind of pre-packaged that. So they've given you the hardware that already has the software on it right out of the box. And so you're ready to go. It's essentially a little inexpensive computer with a little web server built into it that you can buy, and uses Java, which is similar to some of the other ones that we've talked about, which I think, not being a programmer, but I understand is a pretty well-known language in the sense that there's a lot of people who write it, and I think it's one of relatively easier languages for people to learn on, is what I've heard. And so this one does use Java, and basically allows you to use any Java-enabled web browser to control and monitor Insteon-enabled devices. So very much focused on Insteon as well, along with a number of the other ones we've talked about on the show.
Yeah, this one, honestly, the first time I heard of these guys was when I was speaking with Richard Gunther, or listening to him talk about his Insteon setup. And I guess the ISY 99 something was the processor. I think the 994 is the new one that's out, but this is the processor that a lot of the Insteon guys would pick up to make their Insteon system do a lot more. Like, it gives it the ability to do some more advanced rules and scenes and actions, and basically integrates with other things. I think Insteon has come a lot further since then, and I'm not sure how much this is actually needed. But I've known that I've known this existed for a little while, and I know that it has a pretty good following. And again, like you said, it's something that you're buying from somebody. This is one that is a company, and they do have sales, so they'll give you support somehow, which I kind of like that, honestly. I don't know how good it is. I don't have any firsthand experience with it, but it looks like a pretty decent looks like a pretty decent product, and it looks
Yeah.
like you can get a lot done with it.
Yeah, they've got a number of modules that you can kind of expand on top of it. So you talked about the ISY 9914 ZWIR, and so that's a bit of a mouthful, but that's basically the kind of the more robust version. It's got the Z stands for or the ZW stands for Z-Wave, and then it's also got the IR expansion piece on it as well. And so you can get that with the Insteon dual band PLM, which is the module that you need to kind of get started with Insteon, and that's $350 on smarthome.com. So you're looking at, not a small amount of money, but that's a pretty comprehensive deal. What I like about what ISY has done is they've made it easy to start small and scale up. So they built like expansion slots onto the basic module so that you can start with that. And then if you want to add maybe the Z-Wave or the IR functionality later, you're able to do that. They've also got different modules. They talk about a network module, climate, electricity, X10, irrigation, elk security. So they've got a number of integrations that they list out where you can buy these little modules to add on top of what you've already got. So it allows you to start small and build up from there, which I think is a cool thing. And, not something every company does is thinks about giving you that easy upgrade path. And so I commend them from that. I think on the cons, it was kind of a clunky and dated looking interface to me, but I think we've talked about it with a number of these platforms, and I just don't think that user interface is a primary concern for their target audience. They're just people that are tinkering and wanting to make things work, and I think they would probably not freely admit to the fact that, hey, they're not going to say, no, we don't care about our interface, of course, but I think at the end of the day, when you're talking about these sort of open source initiatives and volunteer initiatives in a sense, that's just something that's going to get put on the back burner. So not terribly surprising, but I think this is really clearly a good solution for Insteon users who are looking to add, a little more integration ability and just put that software layer on top of Insteon to give you maybe some better control.
Yeah, well, this one isn't open source. This is a real company that buys and sells this product. So this is very much closed source. You wouldn't be able to download the software for it. I'm not sure if that's what you were saying, but
I'm just saying in general, with the companies that we've talked about here, including this one, and knowing their target market, I just don't think that the interface is a priority. Now, whether or not they're admitting that to themselves or if it's just it is what it is, I don't know. But it was a consistent theme when we were looking at these, was that the interface just really wasn't good.
The way I see most of these interfaces being designed is as if a engineer who probably did a really good job designing the back end of the system also was in charge of designing the front end of the system.
Yes, that was a much thank you, a much more concise way of saying it.
Yeah. I've engineers like to have options. I worked with one engineer on one project once, and he had text fields for notes on every single attribute that you could possibly think of. And I said, why do you have notes on the IP address of this product? Oh, well, what if you want to put a note on that? Like, just take all the notes out and have one main note section. You can write it all there.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
exactly. Engineers, they're a special breed, but man, they do some really cool work.
Yep, it's definitely a different approach, and so let's wrap up here. I know we saved one, Seth, that I think you felt the best. We saved the best for last year. At least this was your favorite of the ones that we looked at.
Yeah, and oddly enough, it's one that integrated with a couple of the open source versions that we talked about before. I think OpenHab and Home Assistance both had integration with this product, which I thought was odd, because then you're buying this, and then I guess you're extending it with OpenHab, or maybe just putting in a different interface on it. I'm not sure. But that's Vera, and I actually have one of these at my house. They cost from about $100 to $150 for a little hardware controller that you get. You basically register online with their website, and then you get it runs a local web server on itself. You, as the end user, I could send this off to my parents. This is kind of my litmus test. Like, would my parents be able to install this? I'd say no on every single one of these up until Vera. Because you can send it off. It basically scans your network, or somehow scans and looks for the Vera. And if it can't find it, you type in serial number, and it registers it online. And you go online, you type in your username and password, it gets you back to your controllers every single time, just like magic. So I really like this one. They're modeling the product closer to what I would consider more of it's more security focused, which for the most part, home automation is. Like, that's the main thing that you have in your house, that you can get data from for home automation is a security system. It's got all the tiny little sensors laying around, motion detectors, heat and smoke detectors. All that stuff is great for a home automation system. It's what really brings in the ability to automate things, because you won't know that something's happening or if somebody's home if say the security system's armed. Well, if it's not integrated, the home automation system won't know that somebody's not home. So I think it's a clever way. They have 4 system states that they kind of present right up front, and that's home, away, night, and vacation, which is pretty succinct if you ask me. Like, I can't really think of another state my home might be in. And I can tell you as a Control 4 guy, like, we get asked all the time, like, where's the vacation mode on this? How do I put my home into vacation mode? And we have to do all sorts of fun stuff to program around that. It's built right in. So there's no cost to that remote access that I was talking about, which I thought was a pretty big plus. There's an iOS app. It also has Apple Watch support, which is pretty cool. Let's see. I guess I'll touch on some cons because I do have them. Support is not really what I would call support. It takes forever for them to get back to you. I called the voicemail line once and left a message at about 9 o'clock in the morning, and they got back to me when I was walking into a restaurant eating dinner at about 6:30 at night.
That's pretty bad.
And I'm like, I'm not even there. I couldn't tell you what the problem is right now. So, yeah. When things go south on it, they really do go south. And the biggest problem I had with this one is that the documentation is online and it's horrible. It's dated. Like, what Vera has done evidently over time they've updated their UI and their product. And they haven't updated the documentation. Like, the old documentation for the old systems are still out there. But you're looking for, like, the steps on how to do it with the new system, and you're having to, like, infer things from the old documentation. It's very, very strange. And there's really no way that I could find, and I'm pretty good with Google. There's really no way I could find, how to, like, get around that.
Right.
It's kind of a mess.
Yeah, I think that's a tough thing for companies to keep up to date, and it's unfortunate because that's such a critical piece.
Yeah. And the last point is, like, when I'm having problems, since the UI on this, like the app and the web page is so high level, it doesn't really give you, like, me at least, the nitty gritty things, like what exactly is going on here. Where is the point that this is breaking down and not working? I don't get that. I mean, you get a nice little tiny little blue banner that stretches across and has, like, a couple little update words that don't mean anything to anybody except maybe the Vera people who know what's going on. And what the thing I had a problem with was there was a room that got added in somehow. I couldn't delete this room. I couldn't delete the device that was in the room. I called them up, left a message. There's a remote support thing that you can check off in there, and I just left it open, and they remoted in and deleted the room for me.
Interesting.
So, yeah, a neat product, and for the price and for what it integrates with, I think it is probably the best DIY solution out there right now. I don't have that much default on it. I've integrated it with Sonos. It's very, very limited with that. I've integrated with door locks and cameras. It'll do a couple of things, but if you want to get outside of, like, play pause with Sonos, like if you wanted to do something like at 9 a.m. I want you to play this specific Pandora station, that's super easy in, like, Control 4. But with this, you're going to start programming. You're going to have to learn Lua and start programming, like adding in this Lua scripting language, which I find to be a little off-putting. for this particular, since everything else is so high level, as soon as you want to do something like that is slightly more advanced, like to go straight to the back end and start doing the scripting stuff seemed a little off to me.
Right.
So hopefully they'll work that out in the future.
Well, at least they've got rid of some of that stuff on the more basic configuration, as clearly we've seen. Not all of these companies or products have, and so at least they've made some of it easy. And there you have it. That's our wrap up of these different DIY and open source and various platforms and hardware solutions out there. And I think that I agree with you. I think Vera looks to me like the most compelling one, and would definitely be a great place, I think, for anybody looking to get into this to start their search. So with that, we can kind of wrap up the show. Again, we really just wanted to focus on these platforms. It's not something we talk about very often. We do feel like it's kind of, these solutions are really targeted at a very, very specific audience, and people that really want to roll up their sleeves, get their hands dirty, want to do this as a hobby. I think any one of these solutions will have pros and cons, obviously, like we've talked about, and I think they can all be made to work. You're going to have to bend them to your will to varying degrees, and if anybody out there is listening to the show and is taking on one of these projects, or maybe has recently taken on one of these projects and used these particular products, we'd love to hear from you. Shoot us a tweet over on Twitter. HomeTech Podcast would be a great way to do that, or you could hop over to the website at HomeTech.fm/feedback and shoot us a line over there as well.
Yeah, and the same thing if we missed one that you're using or you've seen in the past, let us know, because I am curious about this stuff. I really like to check it out and see where it stands. And we're putting this episode out. This is a snapshot in time, in March of 2016 of where these systems, are in their development. And I'm curious as to where we'll be in March of 2017, or maybe later on in this year, as to where some of these projects might be.
Right. All right. Well, had fun doing this show with you, Seth. Look forward to doing another one next week. Just want to mention one last thing. If you're interested in keeping up with what we're doing at HomeTech and hearing more from us, take a minute to hop over to our website at HomeTech.fm, and on the right-hand side, you'll see a sign-up form for our email list, and we're trying to put out an email every week with a few of the bigger stories and sharing some of our thoughts on those, and we also send out weekly show reminders. So we'd love to have you if you want to join us over there as well.
Absolutely. I guess with that, man, we'll wrap this one up. It was great talking to you this week. I'll talk to you next week.
All right. Sounds good, Seth. Take care.